powerful economic groups called the major tunes. Now, so that you had a transformation of representative government. At the same time that that these developments took place, you also had this competition with the Soviet Union, in which America was put on what they called a Cold War footing. But that brings up the very peculiar status of war in American society. We have been a warlike nation for a long time, almost from the very beginning of the Republic. American leaders such as Hamilton were not satisfied with the inauguration of a new government. They talked openly about the need to annex Canada. Then, of course, you had the great westward push, which involved a series of wars, Indian wars, then a Mexican war. And so that throughout that 19th century and on into the 20th century, you have American power assuming a very important warlike stance. We intervened in Mexico in the early part of the 20th century. We intervened in the Philippines and fought a long war. We intervened in Latin America throughout the 20s. So that the picture we have of America is so grossly at odds with what we are. But the peculiar character of war that Americans have been involved in is that the home front has never been touched. So that war is always fought at a distance, which means that Americans go on with their normal lives, as Bush said, consume and fly, while at the same time its forces were destroying other societies, toppling other governments, and reducing other populations to a subject status. So that the notion that we have of ourselves is so skewed by the fact that we have engaged in warlike activities without being touched by very, very significantly by the effects of that war. At the same time, the Cold War, but it really begins with McCarthyism, where you get this anti-communism campaign, which turns the Cold War internally. That is, you hunt out spies in American society, communists. You call for loyalty oaths from the faculty, and the whole result of that is that you begin to get the Cold War, as I say, turned inwards, and fear becomes a kind of constant of American life. We're looking for spies, we're looking for saboteurs, we're looking for communists. We look for them in the government, we look for them in the universities, we look for them in the media, we look for them in Hollywood, and the result is that we get a society that's being shaped to really be distanced from politics and to be in a certain state of continuous fear and uncertainty. Now, this, it seems to me, is not a recipe for an ideal democratic citizen. It is, however, a recipe for a citizen who is the subject of an empire. That is to say, a citizen who is worried, who doesn't take part particularly in politics, who too is amused by the media and constantly kept at a distance. Now, that seems to me sort of what's taken place in recent years that lead to my calling it a system of inverted totalitarianism. The main actors in this are corporate power, which is now wedded to state power in a way that had never been true in the 19th century, and had certainly never been true in the 20th century, particularly in the case of the New Deal, which was strongly anti-corporate. But now corporate power has become politically of age, and it's manifested in the lobbyists, it's manifested in campaign finance, where millions of dollars are poured from corporate coffers into the coffers of political parties. So that's the kind of formulation I've had developed in the book, and I'd be glad to discuss any points if you'd like further.
I appreciate your overview. Thank you. There are three issues I would like for you to go into a little more depth in. From what I understand you're saying then, in effect we have made the war on terror and to a mythological thinking of the population to further a totalitarian agenda. That's one issue. Excuse me, because I look at our rights that have been usurped, the Patriot Act 1, the Patriot Act 2, the Homeland Security Act, and the taking away habeas corpus, the Fourth Amendment. All the while, those who claim that they're for democracy should have been raising some voices about illegal eavesdropping.
Right.
Now, had we had this happen during Richard Nixon's era, we found that virtually anyone in America could have had their phones tapped, their emails read, irrespective of their position as considered a terrorist, just anybody, and it was overtly illegal. I've spoken with constitutional lawyers who have said this was an illegal act. But along comes the Congress, including Obama, and votes to make it no longer an illegal act and to continue the practice on. And I'm thinking, where are the Democrats? Where are the libertarians? Where are the people who are standing up and saying, hold on a second, this has nothing to do about some jihadist, some Al-Qaeda. You're trampling our rights. I'm fighting a major battle right now, which will culminate in a rally next week at the state capitol, where, and I, even though this seems aside from the issue, I feel it's very much a part of it. I'll just give you an example, and then you can tell me your thoughts on this. I decided to look in depth at 4 simple questions. Are vaccines safe? Are they effective? If so, what is the proof? Where's the science? If vaccines are not safe or not effective, where's the proof? Where's the science? Now, since we mandate vaccines, you can't work in a hospital unless you get a vaccine. You can't go in the armed forces. You can't go to most schools. And in the state of New Jersey, you must have a vaccine to get into the schools. You must have a flu shot. And so I looked in specifically the flu vaccine. Does it show safety and efficacy in helping children? The answer is unequivocally no, even the manufacturer's own package imprint. But I have a lot of science to back it up. And then I looked diligently and brought in some scholars. Find me the science that shows this stuff is safe and effective. And there is none. Now, this is one of those situations like with Acorn, where on one hand Fox is saying, why isn't the other media covering? Well, some are to some degree. But I'm saying, what has happened to our journalist integrity when we refuse to look at something that is a public policy mandated that we must take it? And now the swine flu vaccine, it is going to be mandatory in some places, and some individuals, such as in hospital personnel, you'll lose your job. If you don't get the swine flu vaccine, you lose your job. And yet when we looked at the science behind it, there are no science studies showing safety or efficacy to the contrary. And I'm talking about good, qualified science. Now, but I do see where the manufacturers, these corporations, stand to make anywhere between $20 to $100 billion. Most of that is going to be profit. They did not have to justify their cost, nor do they have to justify their pricing of it to the government. So there's a situation where instead of having good science that dictates public health policy, we have corporate science that dictates corporate profits, and no one's allowed to get in there and say, hold on a second, if you're going to do a mass immunization program, shouldn't we at least know that you're not doing a mass experiment on human beings? Well, we have accumulated thousands and thousands of scientific studies. We have talked with some of the greatest minds in the world on vaccine safety and efficacy and chemistry. Not one of them is willing to state that vaccines have been proven safe or effective individually or collectively, and yet we're using them individually and collectively. So there's just one example to me of an inverted totalitarianism where corporate interests are creating public policy with a full force of political lawmaking, and yet they're the ones who wrote the laws, not the congresspersons. They're the ones who hire scientists to go before government hearings and before the public saying it would be irresponsible not to give these vaccines. And at every step, there is nothing but politics. And we went one step further. We went to a think tank in Washington that collects information on who worked in Congress, who goes to work for a corporate sponsor, and how much money did they get from those corporations when they were in office. And without question, the people who are now lobbyists, the group you were